It's unheard of to draft a quarterback, again, with that high capital and not actually want him to play for you until years down the road.
Welcome into the NFL on Fox podcast. I'm Dave Helman, and y'all, we stopped guessing and we started drafting. The first round of the 2024 NFL draft is in the books. So much more left to go. A whole day 2 and day 3 are on the horizon this weekend. We will have the rest of the draft for you on the other side of the weekend. But man, we have got a chock full show here on a Friday. Strap in as I go through the first round of the 2024 NFL draft with some company. Fox Sports' own, our friend, our draft nerd buddy, Carmen Vitali, NFC North reporter, but also my partner in crime for this 2024 draft cycle.
Yeah. It's been a wild ride, Davey boy.
It felt like it would be fitting to recap this. You know, we've done the mock drafts. We've talked so much about what might happen. It felt like it would only be fitting to have you on to recap it. I forgot this at the top, but if you haven't already done it, you know the drill. Go subscribe on Spotify, on Apple Podcasts, all that good stuff. Like I said, we'll be back Monday to give you day 2 and day 3. But enough of that, because Carmen, we got some stuff to talk about.
We got some things.
In a lot of ways, the first round of this draft went according to script in the sense of a lot of quarterbacks off the board. You know, it was a quarterback heavy draft, an unprecedented 6 in the first 12 picks. Ties an NFL record from 1983 for most quarterbacks taken in a first round, but they did it in 12 picks. They didn't need the whole first round. I was going to say,
that was the fastest it's ever happened.
23 offensive players. We talked about the offensive tackles, the receivers on top of the quarterbacks. It lived up to the hype.
It did.
It set a new record. The previous high was 19. That hadn't happened since 2009. Blew that out of the water. NFL defenders must feel like they need to go lobby for
14 straight offensive picks. The previous record, I believe, was 7. So they doubled that.
Unbelievable.
Insane.
And so, like I said, that part of it we expected. But of course, you can never completely predict the insanity of an NFL draft. So we're actually going to start this backward, because if you're listening to this, you probably at least saw the headlines. You know, Caleb Williams, shocker of shockers, goes number 1 to the Chicago Bears.
Worst kept secret of the draft.
Jaden Daniels, shocker of shockers. He's been linked to the Washington Commanders for the better part of 2 weeks.
Yeah.
He goes number 2 overall to Washington. And then there was a lot of smoke and a little bit of fire about teams potentially trying to trade up with New England.
I can't believe that they made that pick.
They hung in and they take Drake May out of North Carolina. We'll get into those 3, but I think we can safely say that was pretty expected, right?
Yeah.
To the point where through the first 30 minutes of the draft, I was like, man, this is kind of boring.
Yeah.
Everybody's just hanging in here and making quarterback picks. But then let's talk about the second 3 quarterbacks that go off the board, because shit got wild. Starting at number 8 overall, you know, Marvin Harrison goes off the board to the Arizona Cardinals. The Chargers take Joe Alt. Malik Neighbors goes to the Giants. Again, everything going according to script.
Although I will say that I think Vikings fans especially were holding their breath through a lot of these picks.
Yes.
Because they were like, I even was like, okay, when is the trade up coming? When is the trade up coming? When is the trade up coming? And it didn't happen until much later, I think, than we expected.
And it wasn't, and the quarterback that we thought they had to trade up to get wasn't even the right guy. Because at number 8 overall, the Atlanta Falcons do one of the most shocking, if not the most shocking things I've seen in my 12 years covering the NFL draft.
Yeah.
They take Washington quarterback Michael Penix Jr., 8th overall. And what I said at the time, Carm, was in a vacuum, I get it. Like Michael Penix Jr.'s only flaws, we talked about this before the draft, four major injuries during college. He's the second oldest quarterback in this draft. He's turning 24 at the beginning of May. But if you're comfortable with the medicals, you probably think this guy's great. The issue comes in the fact that the Atlanta Falcons gave Kirk Cousins $180 million. $100
million guaranteed.
2 months ago? Can you make sense of this for me?
No, because I get wanting to guard against a Kirk Cousins injury. He's 36. He's coming off an Achilles injury. You don't know if he's really going to be ready for the start of the season. I totally get wanting a contingency plan. But why is your contingency plan, like you said, the second oldest quarterback in this draft who also has injury concerns, by the way? I was spending a top 10 pick on a guy that you, in best case, don't want to start for you for the next couple of years.
I'm glad you said that real quick. Falcons general manager Terry Fontenot was quoted after the pick post-draft press conference of saying, if you believe in a quarterback, you have to take him. I get that.
Sure.
Then he says, if he sits 4 or 5 years, then it's a great problem to have.
What?
My guy. Not when you have a $200 million quarterback on your roster. It's not when the Atlanta Falcons, even if they had traded back, could have been the first team in the draft to take a defensive player.
Listen, the Atlanta Falcons are not the Green Bay Packers. Nobody can get away with this. You can't get away in today's modern NFL by wasting a quarterback's rookie contract. It just doesn't work. Team building doesn't work like that. And the only reason it works in Green Bay is because they don't have ownership pressures and they also have a track record for this working out for them. It's unheard of to draft a quarterback, again, with that high capital and not actually want him to play for you until years down the road.
I don't think you can oversell how gutsy, or if you don't want to be so nice.
Irresponsible, reckless.
Well, I was trying to be nice because I like Michael Penix Jr. as a player.
I do too.
I think Michael Penix Jr. could be successful. And I'll even point out Atlanta is well positioned to help a quarterback succeed. When you think of the offensive line, you have Drake London and Kyle Pitts and Bijan Robinson is there.
And a defense that you can rely on.
He's not supposed to be playing. That's the issue here.
Right.
Like,
exactly.
If you want insurance, can I interest you in a Spencer Rattler or a Michael Pratt or a Sam Hartman much later in the draft? The report came out after the draft was over, after the pick was made. The Falcons told Kirk Cousins when they were on the clock.
On the clock, right. He had no idea this was coming.
He did expect the Falcons might address the position.
Sure.
Not at 8 overall.
No. And justifiably so. Kirk Cousins apparently was mad that you're using a pick like that to not make the 2024 team better.
This is a team that, and I'm not handing them the NFC South. That's not the point. But they are a team that is expected to fight for that, to be in the mix for a playoff spot.
Yes.
And that was something that I thought was so impressive about going to get Kirk Cousins is you address the quarterback need without having to use the number 8 overall pick. You say, this could be Dallas Turner. This could be Leatu Latu. This could be
an offensive
tackle. It could be a receiver.
Yeah.
It could have been Roma Dunze if you really wanted to load up on the offensive side of the ball. It could have been so many players,
offensive linemen, that
make this team better immediately. And it's a guy that you hope never needs to play for you anytime in the next 2 years. And that's, again, I want to stress, like, it's not a knock on Michael Penix. It's just a knock on the Falcons' approach to this whole thing.
I want to caution against holding this against Michael Penix.
Right. All he can do is put on the hat.
He didn't expect this.
No.
He was shocked too. He did not think that call was coming from Atlanta. And no one apparently thought this call was coming from Atlanta. Like, across the board, it seems that there was plenty of interest in Michael Penix Jr. And if anything, I think he kind of deserves our sympathy because Michael Penix Jr. starts at another team that trades up to get him, which we hear that there was a ton of interest in doing so for him. So sorry, Michael Penix. Instead of going to another team and being able to start, you're going to ride the bench in the best, again, in the ideal scenario for the team you went to.
Let's not get carried away because as the number 8 overall pick in the NFL draft, Michael Penix is also now on a fully guaranteed contract worth many millions of dollars. So, like, Sure, I'm sure he wishes he had a cleaner path to the field, but that's a nice consolation prize.
I suppose.
It's as bold gets. Terry Fontenot, to some degree, I applaud you for having the balls to go this far outside of the box.
Only if it works out.
But only if it works out. And if it doesn't, everybody's so fired.
And I was just going to say, here's the thing. We're not going to know if this worked out until 3 years down the line. Unless Kirk Cousins gets hurt and now you've got a ready-made starter, like if he re-injures the Achilles or something that knocks him out for the season again, now it's like, all right, now you look really, really smart, Atlanta. But
can I play devil's advocate?
Okay.
Jordan Love looks pretty good.
Yeah. Again, the Atlanta Falcons are not the Green Bay Packers. You can't do this. You can't get away with wasting multiple years of a contract.
They did do it.
They did.
And it's one of the crazier things
it is.
I've ever seen. We'll see how it ages. Maybe Kirk is coming off the Achilles. Maybe they'll need Michael Penix Jr. this year, and
they're just paying Kirk Cousins $100 million guaranteed for no reason at all. That would work out for Kirk Cousins. I wouldn't feel bad for him. I don't feel bad for Kirk Cousins right now.
Again,
I know he was blindsided, but I don't feel bad for him.
$90 million in the bank the minute he signed that contract. No, I think he'll be okay. It turned out that was just a theme of bold calls at the quarterback position, which we
haven't even gotten to the other weird one.
We'll get there. First, we expected the Minnesota Vikings to have to do something bold.
Right.
Ironically, they just sort of sat back. They trade up one spot from 11 to 10 with the New York Jets, but they gave up a 4th and a 5th round pick.
Yeah. Yes.
They give up some day 3 compensation, maybe a little bit of extra change, but held on to their second first round pick, which you and I did not see that coming.
I didn't see them being able to make that.
Didn't give up next year's pick, and they draft JJ McCarthy out of Michigan, the national championship winner with the Wolverines. And all things considered, considering what we thought was going to be necessary versus what they actually needed to do, we have no idea how well JJ McCarthy will play or when he'll play. Sam Darnold is in Minnesota. Considering what was expected to be the price versus what the price wound up being.
Oh, yeah.
You got to feel pretty good if you're Kwesi Adofo-Mensah.
Absolutely, because you thought that maybe you would have to trade into the top 5 to get JJ McCarthy. And from all reports said that there was an effort to trade up with New England to get Drake May, especially when Jaden Daniels was the second quarterback off the board. But there was a last dish effort there. But apparently New England was just really dug in on making that pick and weren't going to part with what Minnesota was undoubtedly offering, which is, again, what you just said, probably 2 first rounders this year and next year's first rounder. I can't believe they didn't take that haul. But now
New England's insistence on not getting out of there, very impressive on their part, but we'll see how it ages.
Well, I was going to say, we'll see how it ages, because right now Drake May is not set up for immediate success.
We'll get to him in a minute.
But yeah, I appreciate the fact that the Vikings ended up getting really good value for getting their quarterback. And if JJ McCarthy is going to be an NFL quarterback for years and years to come, he could not have asked for a better situation to go to than Minnesota. Minnesota essentially has insulated themselves with all the talent on the offensive side of the ball, the defense, especially now that they have Dallas Turner. They've insulated against any of the quarterback play against under center. They absolutely are kind of going the 49ers route of let's just throw a bunch of talent around the quarterback position, and that way our quarterback doesn't have to be a world beater. He doesn't have to be Caleb Williams. He can just operate the offense and develop and take his time and have 2 former quarterbacks and Kevin O'Connell and Josh McCown to learn from, along with all these really fun things that Minnesota has on offense and defense as well.
The interesting thing for me is just that at the end of the day, and it was a bit of a curveball, but the Vikings quote unquote settled for QB5.
Yeah.
The 5th quarterback off the board. Now, did they have JJ McCarthy ranked a lot higher than that? Did they see him as the 2nd or 3rd best guy? They'll probably guard that secret forever.
Right.
But they officially wound up with the 5th guy. And is that good enough? You know, when you consider how high powered this quarterback class is seen. And I'm curious, but I think what makes it better is they didn't wind up parting with that much.
Right.
If JJ McCarthy doesn't work out, it's not like they lost resources that'll set this franchise back. Again, we're going to get to it, but they made another first round pick in Dallas Turner. So
Yes.
they didn't have to give up all these crazy resources that I was so convinced they would have to do. So for that, I think it worked out about as well as you could expect, regardless of what we wind up seeing from JJ. Now let's get
weird.
Let's get to the
Let's
last
get
one.
real weird.
The weirdest one of all, and that's saying something considering Michael Penix went in the top 10. But at number 12, we thought Sean Payton would be a wild card with the Denver Broncos. We thought maybe they would try to trade up. They would take a quarterback. Well, they do. They make Oregon's Bo Nix
a top 12 pick.
The 12th overall pick and the 6th quarterback selected in the first round of this draft. The floor is yours. I don't know. Where do you want to start here?
I mean, honestly, I just tweeted this out. If you didn't see this coming, you don't know Sean Payton. Like, I think that they were going to have to get a quarterback. You can't stand pat with Zach Wilson. And
don't you think it's weird, though, that, and I know it was a minor trade. That's not my point. It's not like you're heavily invested in Zach Wilson, but they traded for Zach Wilson 2 or 3 days before they went and drafted Bo Nix. Like, why even do that? They're already paying Jarrett Stidham a decent amount of money.
Yeah.
They got rid of a draft pick.
I think it's just Sean Payton throwing stuff against the wall and being like, all right, who can I mold? Who's going to make me look really good? Who's going to make me look like I looked after I made Drew Brees into what he is? Because you know that he takes credit for Drew Brees. So now it's like, who can he mold? And I do think that Bo Nix is a little bit moldable. And maybe that's where the appeal comes in. He's got some really good nuts and bolts to him. It's just the consistency. He's got an arm.
He's got a cannon of an arm. He's a great athlete too. He's a talented player. I think everybody expected Bo Nix to be a top 50 pick, which is high.
What I want to know though is, like, were there any other teams? I mean, I know Denver didn't have the second round pick, so that makes it a little bit more interesting. But at that point, like, I don't know, were there other teams like on Denver's heels, like, we're going to take Bo Nix in the first round. You guys better go get him.
We'll never know. But every year we get these lessons that the league just thinks so much differently of some of these guys. I wanted to shout this out. Our friend Arif Hassan, very talented writer, friend of the show.
We love Arif.
Every year he compiles the consensus big board. So he takes 101 boards from around the media landscape, people who rank players, evaluators, from the biggest names all the way down. And he compiles them to like an average of the value of each player's grade and where they stack up on everybody's board. This is not the end all be all, obviously. But according to 101 different people who evaluate this stuff, Bo Nix was the consensus 38th overall player in this year's class. So,
and you took him 12,
which will be fair to the Broncos. Maybe they've got him right, and they're that much smarter than everybody else.
That's true.
Or maybe they just made one of the all-time most memorable draft reaches ever.
Ego is a hell of a drug, Davey boy.
I mean, I what I don't want to do is like write any of this in stone.
No.
The night that the picks are being made. But it's a hell of a gamble when you know that you are going to be one of the most memorable things from this draft, whether it's because you were right or because you were wrong. Sean Payton does have A, the resume, and B, the ego to probably, he's probably okay with that. Yes. I don't think Sean Payton's losing a lot of sleep about stepping out on this limb, but it's a hell of a limb to step out on.
And especially when you're looking at the team around him and you're kind of evaluating the whole situation. Like, is Denver decent? Okay, but can you argue like they had other needs that were more pressing than taking the 38th player?
That's maybe a trade back and take Bo Nix in the 20s, but then you don't know who's willing to come up. And that's the stuff that we'll never completely figure out.
Right.
I think the fact that they didn't have a second round pick
really hurt them.
And it led to this.
Yes.
I can imagine Sean Payton sitting in that room saying, I'm not losing this guy later because we don't have enough picks to get him later on. Let's just freaking do it because we need a quarterback.
Yeah.
Really quickly before we move on, let's hit on the big 3 picks at the top. I mean, actually, we'll talk about Caleb, but a big night in Chicago.
Oh, yeah.
You get Caleb Williams 1, then you just let Rome Odunze, one of the top 3 receivers in this draft,
fall in your lap.
Fall in your lap.
Yep.
I do love, like I said, it was out there that the Commanders might take Jaden Daniels. What I love is how they are now set up. They get their quarterback, probably don't feel great about his situation, but on Friday, tonight, they have pick 36, pick 50, pick 67, pick 78, and 100. So a huge, huge opportunity for the Commanders to now go and add a supporting cast. And then lastly, we'll see how this ages for the New England Patriots because I love Drake May.
I do too. I'm kind of bummed.
Who's going to help this kid?
I know. That's why I'm bummed. I'm like, oh, I would have loved to have seen him in Minnesota, quite honestly. I think that he could have hit the ground running. And I don't think that's possible in a place like New England, who has umpteen other positions to fill and isn't ready to actually compete. And a quarterback situation, a rookie quarterback situation that he goes to is so important. I think that's the biggest indicator of success we've seen is what kind of situation these guys go into. It's not even necessarily about who they are as people, who they are as a player. It's who do they have around them. And Drake May just has no one now.
I feel bad because I love Jacoby Brissett, the veteran that the Patriots signed this offseason. I almost hope the Patriots start Jacoby Brissett so that Drake May doesn't wind up in a Bryce Young sort of situation where he's trying to make the best of a bad situation. The Pats do have the second pick in round 2, Friday night. They make the second pick, 34th overall. I'm going to guess it's offense because Drake May, if he is going to play this year, needs a hell of a lot of help. All right. That covers us for the quarterbacks, which is easily the biggest thing coming out of this draft.
I could talk for hours about this.
We have plenty more to get to, though. So on the other side of this, we will do just that. All right. Welcome back to the show where Carmen Vitali and myself are recapping night 1 of the 2024 NFL draft. I'm going to launch into a segment we're calling Best Home Fit. This segment is brought to you by Zillow, agents, tours, loans, homes. If we're talking best fit, we're going to keep this really simple.
Yeah.
There were 32 picks made on Thursday night, and a couple of them just really tickled our fancy, whether it's just the right player in the right team or a guy that fits a scheme perfectly. Yeah. I've got 2. You've got 2. We're going to start this off with one of my favorite fits. That would be the Seattle Seahawks drafting Texas defensive tackle.
I liked it.
Byron Murphy,
I liked it a lot.
16th overall. And I'll keep it really simple why I like it. I love when a new coach makes an identity pick. Mike McDonald, the coveted defensive coordinator from the Baltimore Ravens. He gets to Seattle and he says, this is what the hell we're going to be. Because what did the Ravens do last year? They helped Justin Madubuike become a $98 million man. They were strong as hell up the middle, defensive tackle, linebacker, safety. The strength of that Baltimore defense was all down the spine. Mike McDonald gets to Seattle and he's like, bring me the badass defensive tackle.
Let's do this again.
Find me my Justin Madubuike. Top 5 in college football in total pressures last year. He had 45 of them. Add that to 36 hurries, 6 sacks as a defensive tackle. The best defensive tackle in this draft class, the only defensive tackle that went in the first round. I love Mike McDonald just circling it and saying, this is what the hell you brought me here for. And this is how we're going to do it. Leonard Williams is already on that defense to be your nose tackle. Yeah. And Byron Murphy's a versatile player. He can do it all. But with Leonard Williams already there, you can just set Byron Murphy loose on the quarterback and say, hey, go win one-on-ones, go penetrate in the middle of the line, pressure the damn quarterback. Just love this pick by the Seattle Seahawks.
I do too. And especially because they were kind of in the market for a defensive tackle last year anyway, before Mike McDonald even got there. So now you get your guy and you get the foundation of a really good Mike McDonald defense.
Take me to yours.
I'm also going to stay on the defensive side of the ball because I had a feeling the Detroit Lions were going to want a defensive back. They were going to want a corner. They had to part ways with Cam Sutton. They did get Carlton Davis, traded for him. But you still, if the past 2 years are any indication, you cannot have enough corners in Detroit. And sure enough, not only did they get a guy, they got one of the best corners in this draft by trading up to get him. And they make this wonderful move to get Terrion Arnold, who can play opposite Carlton Davis. And I think that gives you two really great shutdown corners on the outside, but also Terrion Arnold gives you some position flexibility going inside, kicking inside to that nickel slot too. And I think that you cannot have enough position versatility in this defense.
Oh, did the Lions learn a thing or two from having a versatile Bama defensive pack in their secondary last year?
Perhaps. And it's really funny now because Carlton Davis is outnumbered. He's an Auburn guy. And now you've got...
Oh, they have the Iron Bowl secondary.
They have the Iron Bowl secondary.
Brian Branch, Carlton Davis, and now Terrion Arnold.
I believe their corners coach is also from Bama. Like,
that's shocking.
There's a lot of tide rolling up in Detroit, but I really, really like what this Detroit secondary can become and the fact that it is insulating itself against injury so that the only weakness that you can really point to with this Detroit team last year is now no longer a weakness. And Brad Holmes made damn sure that he was going to go out and get a guy and not have this issue again.
Don't you love the irony that Brad Holmes caught hell last year for the value of the positions that he took? Everybody's, you can't take running back. You can't take linebacker in the first round. And this year, he trades up to go get arguably the best corner in the draft. At least, people made the case for Arnold.
For Arnold, absolutely.
And they trade up to Dallas at 24 and get him there. I call that value. I'm guessing Brad Holmes didn't hear about that this year.
No, he went up and he got his dude. And again, I was so interested to see if their draft strategy was going to change now that their needs had narrowed.
They're trying to put the cherry on top of the sundae.
Like they had the Super Bowl within reach and it got ripped away from them. They don't want that to happen again this year. And they're going to be in a really tough division. So I really appreciate what the Detroit Lions did.
I love it. And in keeping, I love my next one because it's in keeping with the theme of fit, not necessarily player, but fit. Because my next one, I'm just going to keep it in the Texas family, hook 'em horns. Xavier Worthy going to the Kansas City Chiefs, who also made a minor trade up, swapped with their nemesis, the Bills. How about the Buffalo Bills just continuing to give the Chiefs opportunities to draft players? Patrick Mahomes years and years ago. Now it's Xavier Worthy becoming a Kansas City Chief. And here's the funny thing, Carmen. I don't think that highly of Xavier Worthy. I know he ran a 4.21 in the 40. Mm-hmm. He weighs 165 pounds. Mm-hmm. I worry about his physicality. I worry about how well he wins one-on-ones. Yep. I worry about everything other than how quickly he can run in a straight line, basically.
Yes, I think that's fair.
He now plays with Patrick Mahomes and the Kansas City Chiefs, and that
stretches the field. It's
a dynamite fit for so many reasons. I mean, I don't want to compare a rookie to Tyreek Hill, but we already know what this offense can look like with a field stretcher.
Absolutely.
Even if Xavier Worthy isn't catching a lot of balls, which I think he will, but even if he's not,
the threat
makes life easier on Travis Kelce. It makes life easier on Rashee Rice. Yeah. I assume Rashee Rice will play a role this season. I guess we'll see how that goes. But I mean, the guy just the speed changes the game. It's a field flipping asset. Yep. He had 9 gains of 39 plus yards for the Longhorns last year. He can be a return man if they want him to. If he was going to go anywhere, I think it needed to be Buffalo or Kansas City, where you have these big-armed, athletic quarterbacks who can extend plays and launch that sucker downfield. And wouldn't you know, that's exactly where he winds up. So I don't love the player that much, but I love him in Kansas City. Mm-hmm. I just think this is perfect.
I have to go again. I'll go offense too, but this time I got to give some love to the big boys, man. Of course I do.
An offensive line extraordinaire.
I love my offensive linemen, and there were 9 of them taken in the first round, which I believe is just one shy of the record.
Yes,
we love this.
The record was 10,
7 of which were tackles, but some of these tackles of which have position flexibility. I don't say that as to say that Amarius Mims at 6'8" of him is going to kick inside at guard. Although the Bengals do have a guard that is 6'6", and you have Alex Kappa who is 6'5". Those are some big boys in front of Joe Burrow. Clearly, Cincinnati has a type when it comes to offensive linemen, and they mean the bigger the better, and I can't fault him for that. Amarius Mims is going to probably be either in a rotation or maybe take the job from Trent Brown.
He'll be somewhere.
He'll be somewhere.
You can't miss him.
You
He's
can't.
the biggest dude I've ever seen in my life.
It's wild. Okay, what was even crazier though is seeing the draft cam of him and his parents are not that big. Like, he's way bigger than his parents. And I'm just like, how?
Nobody's as big as
Amarius Mims.
6'8", 340. He wears 340 better than any human should be able to.
That's the other
like
thing.
He looks ripped at 340 pounds.
That's the other thing that I want to call out about Amarius Mims, though, is just how incredibly athletic and like twitchy, and the way that he, like, his body control and the level at which he plays, despite the fact he's 6'8", is incredible. Like, it's a home run. And listen, the Bengals cannot have too many offensive linemen either. They're with the injury history they have and the injury history of their quarterback. I love this.
I talked about identity with the Seahawks. Like, the Bengals just keep throwing stuff at their O-line. They're like, oh, signing Lyle Collins didn't work? Try it again. Oh, drafting this guy didn't work? Try it again. We're going to get this right. My favorite thing about Amarius Mims, 8 college starts.
Yeah.
He's that talented that he made 8 college starts and became a top 20 pick. And I don't blame the Bengals.
That's the wild part too, is for as athletic as he is, he has not scratched his ceiling at all.
If he does, I don't think Joe Burrow is going to be getting sacked very often in the future.
No.
That does it for the best home fit. Thanks to Zillow for that. On the other side of this, we're going to get to some more round 1 headlines, as well as some round 1 superlatives. We're back to hit a few more headlines from the first round of the draft. Carm, we touched on it at the top of the show, but let's revisit the Minnesota Vikings and all of their bold maneuvers as they basically sought to become this year's Houston Texans. Last year,
I love that. Not quite as bold as what the Texans
not
had to do.
Not quite as bold. You know, the Texans getting CJ Stroud and Will Anderson at 2 and 3. But the Vikings jumped from 11 to 10 to get their quarterback of the future, JJ McCarthy.
Just one spot.
And then with their second first-round pick, which they did not have to trade, they jump up to 17 in a trade with Jacksonville and get the guy who was widely seen as a top 12 pick in Alabama's Dallas Turner.
Yeah, I think a lot of people thought that Dallas Turner was going to be the first defensive player off the board. And so you think, all right, you essentially got 2 top 10 picks for the price of 1. I mean, you really were thinking that you were going to have to.
You thought you were going to have to give that up in the quarterback trade. You thought you were going to have to give up your
23rd pick and package that with 11 to move up and get your quarterback. Instead, you get your quarterback without having to forfeit that second first-round pick you got from Houston. Talk about being the Houston Texans of this draft. I really, really love the addition of Dallas Turner to be opposite Jonathan Grenard in Brian Flores' defense. Listen, Flo doesn't really know what it's like to have double-digit sack players. He had one in Danielle Hunter last year, but that's the first time as a coordinator he's had, or a head coach even for that matter, that he has had a guy that has double-digit sacks. So he's gotten creative with his scheme out of complete necessity. Now you have Jonathan Grenard, who had 12.5 sacks last year for Houston. Wow, the parallels they just keep coming.
There's a lot of those, yeah.
And then you add a guy on the opposite side of him that's going to force some offensive lines to have to make some really tough decisions on top of having a pretty good interior defensive line rotation. I mean, this is a really scary defense that I think could be a top 5, if not a top 3 unit, and be a unit that can win you games in Minnesota while you figure out what you're doing at quarterback.
I guess the downside is the Vikings don't have very many big-time picks left in this draft.
No, they don't.
They also gave up a 3rd and a 4th in next year's draft to get up for Turner. But you know what? You get 2 face-of-the-franchise players at 2 premium positions, and if they pan out, nobody's going to give a damn. Just ask the Houston Texans. We'll see how it ages, but a big night for the Vikings. Not a big night for the Buffalo Bills.
That was a good. I was on the same page. I was like, in my head, I was like, ooh, this is a good segue if he does it, and you did it.
Not a big night for the Buffalo Bills, because not only did they trade away at 28 in the trade with the Kansas City Chiefs, but then sitting there at pick 32. They let the Carolina Panthers into the first round. The Panthers joined the party. They pick Xavier Leggett out of South Carolina in the final pick of the draft. And now the Bills sit at 33 without having done anything. And like, I'm not going to bore you with all the details, but the amount of picks that were getting sent around, these were not 1-for-1 moves. Like the Bills acquired like 4 picks. They traded away 4 or 5. All I know for sure is that tomorrow night they have picks 33, 60, and 95.
The only pick of consequence they really added was 95, which is in the back end of the 3rd round.
It's an extra day too.
It is an extra day too, but they're thonly making 3 picks tomorrow. They're only making 3 picks Friday night, I should say.
They have a ton of picks, but you're right. Like, how do you weigh the value?
Day 3. It's 7 day 3 picks.
How do you weigh the value? I mean, it's funny to think they've only moved 5 spots.
Right.
Like they did 2 trades, but they only went from 28 to 33. And as we're going to get to in a minute, there's plenty of good players left. There's plenty of good receivers left if that's what they want.
Sure.
But it is just interesting that a team that traded Stephon Diggs to Houston, that has a pretty clear and obvious need, they punted on it not once but twice in the first round. Like I said, there's plenty of receivers left. That's not what I'm worried about. But you lose the 5th-year option by doing this, which it matters.
It does.
It does matter.
Especially when it comes to receivers where we don't see a bubble bursting anytime soon at this point with Amon-Ra St. Brown signing a gigantic contract.
Nothing is won or lost on draft night. I get that. If you're a Bills fan,
yes,
I'm not.
That's true.
Not saying the sky is falling, but it's interesting to see a contender content to just add a couple of picks and wait until Friday.
Unless they're going to do something real crazy that involves a team on the West Coast in the NFC who might have a couple of its receivers.
Which Brandon Ayuk and
Deebo
Samuel apparently both potential trade candidates as the draft continues. We'll get to San Francisco in a minute. Rounding it out, let's talk about a couple more surprising things. Just guys whose names we didn't hear. I think that's a headline worth mentioning. Only a couple that really shocked me. Iowa DB Cooper DeJean, arguably the best player available.
Yes. The
corner, potential safety, return man, jumped out of the gym, ran a really impressive 40. I was surprised to not hear his name called. I think I bought the hype that he was going to become a Green Bay Packer.
Oh, absolutely. I thought that he had Green Bay Packer written all over him, but I do appreciate the Packers went offense this draft because they have 7 first-round picks on the defensive side of the ball. It's about time those guys start performing and you start going over to the offensive side of the ball. And listen, one thing the Packers are going to do is figure out who the best 5 is up front. And as much as it pains me to root for an Arizona Wildcat, being an ASU girly myself, I really appreciate that the Packers took Jordan Morgan, who potentially he's one of those tackles that could kick inside, and you're going to figure out who your best 5 is and where their best positions are in Green Bay. So I appreciate that about them, but I'll be damned if I didn't think Cooper DeJean was going to be a Green Bay Packer.
I really believed it. Kool-Aid McKinstry, the other Alabama corner, another notable name that is still available as of Friday. Really, only 3 cornerbacks. No, 3 cornerbacks went in the first round of this draft, which shockingly low. We'll get to that. So he sits there. I wonder, people talk so much about how valuable the 33 overall pick is. I think him and Cooper DeJean will be in that conversation. And then 2 receivers worth mentioning. Texas receiver Adonai Mitchell, my guy, Georgia receiver Ladd McConkey, both available. And I think that it's surprising, but then you look at it and you see 3 receivers went in the last 5 picks of the first round.
Yeah.
And it wasn't them. So you do the math. Those guys are
Troy
still
Franklin
available.
too.
Troy Franklin out of Oregon. Every year I say this, but it's still true. There's so many fun receivers still sitting out there.
Oh yeah.
If you have a need, Friday night is going to be really fun. All right, let's wrap this thing up with what we're calling superlatives.
Woo.
And I just mentioned we'll get to cornerback because I did want to give him a moment to shine. Because let's start with best value, where we both agree, just by sitting around and waiting, which is not really Howie Roseman's bag. That's not what Howie likes to do.
But he still gets, how is he still getting away with this?
He sits around at 22 and takes the first cornerback in this year's draft.
Without even having to do any work.
Toledo,
at least how he usually has to work for it.
Exactly. Toledo cornerback Quinion Mitchell goes at 22. He's the first cornerback off the board. It's the longest a cornerback has had to wait to get drafted since 2019.
Which was already 5 years
You hang
ago.
back and just get, you didn't have to say that.
I did.
You hang back and get some fantastic value. The Eagles had an obvious need at corner. I feel like they chose that over offensive line.
Mm-hmm.
First time they've drafted a receiver or a cornerback in the first round since Alito Shepherd.
Wow.
Which was a really long time ago. Let's keep it pushing to the biggest surprise of the night. Biggest surprise that wasn't quarterback related.
Yeah, fair.
We already gave them a lot of shine. The most shocking thing I saw other than quarterbacks was what happened at pick 31. San Francisco 49ers go receiver, which is not surprising.
No.
But it's Florida's Ricky Pearsall that becomes a first-round pick. And look, Ricky Pearsall, phenomenal player, Arizona State Sun Devil turned Florida Gator.
Yeah.
Have some phenomenal catches, tough player, but he becomes a first-round pick, which I don't know anybody that had that on their bingo card.
I don't either. He was actually teammates with Brandon Ayuk at Arizona State in 2019, which is...
You got to love the COVID guys and the effect
gotta
that
love
the
the COVID
COVID
guys.
seasons have
But
on
I
these
think
drafts.
what we just talked about earlier, though, where you want the fifth-year option on a position like receiver where you're paying these guys $30 million if they work out for you on their second contract. So I kind of get it, but I also didn't have Ricky Pearsall in the mix as far as like the receivers that we see still left on the board, like we just talked about between Ladd McConkey, Troy Franklin, Adonai Mitchell. Like I definitely didn't see Ricky Pearsall superseding them into the first round.
Yeah, I think most everyone agreed Ricky Pearsall would be drafted by Friday, but to go on Thursday, hey, good for you, buddy. Guarantees you a much bigger payday. Just very much caught me off guard.
By the way, apparently Brandon Ayuk texted John Lynch and Kyle Shanahan saying fire pick, or like the fire emoji, but fire pick after
Arizona State bros, which as we
Sun Devils supporting Sun Devils.
As we already mentioned, apparently, if you listen to the rumblings, just because Brandon Ayuk and Deebo Samuel didn't go anywhere on Thursday doesn't mean they'll stay in San Francisco. So maybe the Ricky Pearsall pick is signaling that a trade could still be on the horizon. Speaking of trades, the best trade on the night.
That was not the Vikings.
I was going to say, we'll keep it. Well, the Vikings were involved. We'll keep it unquarterback related, but I got to give some love. I think we dogpile on the Jags a lot because they do silly things sometimes.
They do.
But the Jags have been a team that's been linked to Brian Thomas Jr. throughout the draft process.
That's true.
They traded away from him at 17 overall.
Right.
Picked up some big-time picks in next year's draft, as well as, I believe, a fifth in this year's draft.
Yes, fifth in this year's draft.
And they still get Brian Thomas Jr. at 23 overall.
Yeah,
so
that was great.
To trade back 6 spots and still get a guy that you would have loved to take at 17.
Yeah.
Good on you, Jacksonville.
Good job, Jacksonville. We're proud of you.
All right, Carm, this one suits you well. It's our superlative of most improved division, which a lot of drafts still to go. But on Friday, how could you say it's anything but the NFC North?
She's a little bit of a drama queen, isn't she?
Yeah.
We love
it's
her.
Always something.
We love
this
her.
division.
We have a meeting, you and I, with all the writers every week, and the amount I have to talk in the meeting because something is going on in the NFC North is a lot. But I don't know how you don't look at this division now after the Bears added Caleb Williams and Roma Dunze, by the way. They have an embarrassment of riches in their wide receiver department, which is insane. I don't know who these Bears are. I don't know her. And now you have the potential answer at quarterback in Minnesota with J.J. McCarthy. But then again, we add Dallas Turner to this defense that I think could be a top 5 unit. This is the most competitive division in football. I don't know how
that's a take.
Is it?
I mean, not a crazy take, but I mean the AFC North is there. The two Norths.
The two Norths are going toe for toe right now.
The two Norths look pretty spicy. I don't disagree.
Because the other two teams that I didn't mention, by the way, also got better. And you have the Packers, who are the youngest team in the league last year, going to the divisional round. And then you have the Lions, who won the division and are, again, making themselves better.
Addressed arguably their biggest need in this
yes.
draft.
Like,
Going back to your point that this division's always doing something, Chicago arguably makes the two biggest impact picks, number 1 and number 9 overall. The Vikings trade twice in the first round. The Lions jump up also in the first round. The Packers were the only team that didn't do anything pretty spicy, and they still managed to sit tight and pick a versatile offensive lineman.
Right.
Where have I heard that before? The Packers having a versatile offensive
their entire
lineman.
I'm telling you, their entire line is versatile for a reason, so they can figure out who the best guys are.
I'm happy the Packers at least had to invest in the offensive line, because I'm so sick of them finding these guys on like day 3. So at least they did it on day 1.
I mean, that's fair, but at the same time, they have quite a few options there and still have 7 first-round picks on the defense.
Let's move to biggest gamble. We don't have to spend a ton of time here because we already said it, but I really think when it's all said and done, maybe even more so than Caleb, Jaden, and Drake. Like, because again, we expected that.
Sure.
We thought all 3 of those guys would be gone within the first 3 to 4 picks of this draft.
Absolutely.
What's going to stand out forever when you think back on this in the years to come is Michael Penix Jr. going 8th overall to a team that had a $180 million quarterback, and
who hasn't even played it down for them
who
yet.
has not even played it down, who hasn't taken the field for practice in Atlanta yet. And then Bo Nix going 12th overall to Denver, seemingly way earlier than most people thought. Like those, I don't know how you can come up with anybody but those 2 teams when you're talking about doing something risky.
Very, very risky. And not to mention, like we were talking about before with Michael Penix, you're not going to know if this risk paid off for the next few years, which in and of itself is a risk. Because Terry Fontenot does not have job security necessarily 4 years down the line. It blows my mind.
It's something I'm going to remember. Like there's something every now and then that you'll remember forever in the NFL draft. Actually, Atlanta's trade up for Julio Jones years and years ago, which turned out really well,
great.
Is
really
another
great.
thing. Add this into the chapter.
Yes.
We're going to remember this years from now, either very, very fondly or maybe not so much. We'll see. Let's wrap it up. A team, all things considered, or a superlative, all things considered, like we haven't probably talked enough about this team. Let's go to best winner. We didn't talk that much about him because it's boring, because we've known Caleb Williams was going to go to the Chicago Bears since December. But Caleb Williams is the biggest winner of night 1 of the draft.
Mm-hmm.
And therefore,
not just the Bears.
Not just the Bears organization.
Caleb Williams himself.
Caleb Williams himself for becoming the number 1 overall pick, but also an hour and a half after getting drafted, finds out that one of the top receivers in this draft is now on his team.
It's his built-in bestie.
And his receiver core is
his built-in bestie.
DJ Moore, Roma Dunze, Keenan Allen. Oh, and DeAndre Swift is playing running back. Oh, and Cole Kmet is at tight end.
You got a new offensive coordinator in Shane Waldron.
Who's a bigger winner than Caleb Williams, knowing that he is the toast of Chicago?
Yeah.
And I mean, not to be too cynical, but has a ton of millions of dollars now guaranteed in his name.
Yeah, well, he's had that for a while. But allow me to wax a little bit poetic about this, because I have something.
You're from Chicago.
I'm from Chicago.
You say what you need to say.
I have something up on foxsports.com right now just about what Caleb Williams could mean to the city itself. And the city that has been starved for any sort of flashy, fun, offensive football. This is not something the Bears have ever had. It's not something they've ever seen in their city limits. And when I tell you that Chicago is a football town, I know the Blackhawks had their dynasty. I know the Cubs broke their 108-year-old curse in 2016. I know the Bulls had the 90s glory years, but when I tell you the city will erupt if the Bears manage sustained success and actually make it to a Super Bowl on the back of Caleb Williams and the team that Ryan Poles built, which is the best situation a quarterback taken first overall has ever come into. I can't imagine the generations of Chicago Bears fans that are affected by that. Because it's not only the generations that are watching now. Think about how the Bears still talk about the 1985 Super Bowl team. Think about the legacy that has lasted 40 years in that city. And now if you can build an actual team that sees success year in and year out, the team will be remembered forever in Chicago, and they deserve it.
So now everyone wearing navy and orange listening to this is ready to run through a wall. And I think that I'm going to emphasize it one more time. The cool thing for the Bears is usually when you draft a talent like Caleb Williams, he is stepping into an awful situation, and you as a fan are saying, maybe in a few years will be something. You know, Joe Burrow is a great example. The Bengals were not these Bengals then. It wasn't built.
Right.
It's here. It's ready. And I'm not trying to say the Bears are going to make the Super Bowl, but they are ready to play fun, competitive football right now and change the way that the league looks at them today. And that is a very rare place to be when you just got done picking number 1 overall in the draft. And that is why Caleb Williams is the biggest winner. Therefore, the Chicago Bears as well. Carm, thank you so much for dropping by the show.
Of course, anytime. You know, again, I can't believe that this ride is almost over, the 2024 draft season, because you've been my ride or die for this.
Okay, it is almost over, but not quite over. There's 2 rounds on Friday. Then there's 4 more rounds after that on Saturday. So many more picks to make. And when it's all done, we'll be back on Monday to break it all down for you. We'll have all the picks from days 2 and 3. We'll have some more analysis from day 1, most likely. Carm's going to be here. We'll have plenty of other people stopping by to break it all down for you. So make sure you're here on Monday. Subscribe on Spotify, Apple Podcast if you haven't already. Go leave us a review. We're on YouTube at NFL on Fox. You can find us on all the social channels at NFL on Fox Pod. It's so much fun, y'all. I love the draft. I can't wait to talk more of it with you on Monday. Until then, I appreciate it, and I'll talk to y'all real soon.